Hi, I'm the History Guy, and if you didn't know, in addition to our channel here on YouTube, we also have a page on Patreon where for just $3 a month you can support the great work we do here at the History Guy. And one of the things that you get for being a patron is one episode a month that goes exclusively to our patrons on Patreon. And occasionally we're able to bring one of those episodes to the YouTube audience, like today when I talk about a trip I took in 2015 to the southeast of England in the county of Essex, where there is a castle that is all full of history that deserves to be remembered. Back in 2015, a friend who lives in the United Kingdom asked if we wanted to come help him celebrate his birthday, and so we went to do what everyone, of course, has always wanted to do for their birthday, and go to Belgium to commemorate the 200th anniversary of the Battle of Waterloo. Since we had already crossed the pond, we took some time to visit some favorite museums around London, a trip down the coast to the historic Portsmouth dockyards, and of course the world-famous Tank Museum, because, you know, tanks. Along the way, we engaged in serious academic historical research and saw some things that I frankly can't explain. It all adds up to another pre-history guy travel log. Our friend was living at the time in Essex County. The county has a lot of history by itself. Sitting northeast of London, the county represents the easternmost part of the Middle Ages kingdom of Essex, part of what was called the Heptarchy, or Seven Kingdoms of Anglo-Saxon England. The history of Essex is relatively obscure. Anglo-Saxon royal genealogists claim that it was founded by a king named Eshwine in 527, but those genealogies can be fanciful. For example, those genealogies also assert that Eshwine was the great-great-great-great-great-great-grandson of Woden, the Germanic god of wisdom, which would make him the great-great-great-great-great-nephew of Thor. I don't know where that fits him in the Marvel Universe, but his divine ancestry aside, there is archaeological evidence at a site called Mucking in southern Essex, suggesting one of the earliest Anglo-Saxon settlements in England, dating to the early 5th century and making the founding of a kingdom in the 6th century entirely possible. The Anglo-Saxons migrated to Britain from Old Saxony, roughly the northwest corner of modern Germany, after the decline of Roman Britain. Prior to the Anglo-Saxons, the area played a significant role in the Roman conquest of Britain. It was a conflict between the local Celtic tribe, the Trinovantes, and the neighboring Catuvellauni that was used as the pretext for Julius Caesar's invasion of Britain in 55 BC. So yeah, if you have a shovel in Essex, you really don't know what kind of coin you might dig up. The name Essex was derived roughly from East Saxons, or East Sax, and the well-known heraldic symbol of Essex County is 3 heraldic saxes. The sax is a type of knife. In fact, sax is an Old English word meaning knife that was used by the Saxons, and doesn't look all that much like the heraldic sax, which kind of looks more like a scimitar. But that confuses some people who wonder if the kingdom/county was named after the knife, or the knife after the kingdom/county. In fact, it is neither. Rather, Dr. Mark Curtis, curator of social history at Chelmsford Museum, explains that the Sax on the country's coat of arms is merely a pun, because the name Sax and Essex sound similar. The kingdom of Essex was defeated and made part of the kingdom of Wessex in the 9th century, was briefly ceded to East Anglia, a Danelaw kingdom, before being restored to Wessex, and by the 10th century was treated as a shire, essentially a county. But then in 1066, William the Conqueror showed up and, conquered, and the Norman period began. In the Norman period, the name county replaced the name shire, but the boundaries of Essex were essentially unchanged. It was, however, hostile land to the Normans, and so they did what Normans did in hostile land. They built castles. In 1086, William granted a manor at a place called Hedingham in Essex to one Aubrey de Vere, who proceeded to build a castle there. Not a whole lot is known of Aubrey de Vere I, but he has been described as the son of one of William's favorite knights. He might have been Norman, and the de Vere part might refer to a place in western Normandy. He was a baron with a good degree of landed wealth who served as a chamberlain under William's son Henry I. He died somewhere around 1113 AD, but his family retained the land. They built a castle there, finishing a stone keep between 1130 and 1140 with inner and outer bailies. The castle was reputedly designed by William de Corbeil, Archbishop of Canterbury. Given that the keep was built some 500 years after Thor's great-great-great-great-great-nephew founded the kingdom after whom the county is named, the keep can properly be called new construction. But for new construction, it stood up pretty well, because although the rest of the castle is gone, the keep of Hedingham Castle remains in remarkably good condition. In fact, it is described as the best preserved Norman keep in England. So well preserved that it cannot be accurately called a ruin, and that alone makes it well worth the visit. Aubrey de Vere's son, also called Aubrey, also served as chamberlain for Henry I, but in November 1120, Henry's only legitimate heir died in a shipwreck, and that eventually resulted in a succession crisis and a period of devastating civil war called the Anarchy. Aubrey de Vere was killed by a London mob during the Anarchy in 1141. Aubrey's son, also named Aubrey, managed to navigate the difficult waters of the time, being granted the title Earl of Oxford from Empress Matilda, one of the pretenders in the succession crisis. But reconciling with King Stephen, the other pretender, becoming so close that Stephen's wife, Queen Maud, was at Hedingham when she died of a fever in 1152. But he managed to come out on the winning side, fighting on behalf of Henry, Beatrice's son, at the Battle of Fornham in 1173. The anarchy finally ended when Henry became king, King Henry II, after the death of Stephen. Aubrey de Vere's deftness at gaining and maintaining his title during the anarchy proved to be a family trait. The de Veres would maintain the title, though often playing central roles in tumultuous times, for more than 5.5 centuries, until 1704, when the 20th Earl of Oxford, whose name was, of course, Aubrey de Vere, died without a male heir. In between the first and last Aubreys were several notable earls. Robert de Vere, the 3rd Earl of Oxford, was one of the disaffected barons who forced King John to sign the Magna Carta in June of 1215. Robert then joined the Barons' War against King John, and then was one of the barons who switched sides again after John's death in 1216. During the period, Hedingham Castle was besieged and taken by King John, the only military action known to have taken place at Hedingham Castle. But Robert's timely side-switching allowed him to be at the center of another civil war and yet end up with his titles and lands restored. Robert de Vere, the 9th Earl of Oxford, had such a close relationship with King Richard II that he was created the first Duke of Ireland. He was so unpopular that his friendship with the king partly motivated a revolt against Richard. Robert led the king's troops at the Battle of Radcot Bridge in 1387, where he was soundly defeated. He died in exile in France, but the de Veres maintained their titles and lands, which went to his uncle, yet another, Aubrey de Vere. His son, Richard de Vere, the 11th Earl of Oxford, was one of Henry V's band of brothers, acting as a commander in the 1415 Battle of Agincourt. His son, John de Vere, the 12th Earl of Oxford, continued to support the Lancastrian cause, and so was executed as a traitor when the Yorkist Edward IV took the crown. The 12th Earl was beheaded on Tower Hill in 1462. But Edward was trying to put an end to the War of the Roses, and so allowed John de Vere's son, also named John de Vere, to inherit the title and become the 13th Earl of Oxford. He got his revenge for his father's death, being one of the principal Lancastrian leaders of the time. He helped restore Henry VI in 1470. After the Yorkist victory in the 1471 Battle of Barnet, he was exiled. For a while was a pirate, because, don't all good stories involve pirates? He was caught, imprisoned, stripped of titles and lands, escaped, and then led the archers at the 1485 Battle of Bosworth Field, using a formation so effective that it became known as the Oxford Wedge. Richard III was killed in the battle, Henry VII became king, and Oxford had all his lands and titles restored. Regaining the hereditary title of Lord Great Chamberlain, he officiated both at the coronation of Henry VII and his son, Henry VIII. Another Edward de Vere, the 17th Earl of Oxford, was only 12 when his father died, and so became a ward of Elizabeth I. He was a notable poet and playwright, and one of the first to compose love poetry at the Elizabethan court. While his work was well regarded, he was a wastrel who frittered away much of the Oxford estates. It was his mismanagement that led to the loss of much of the land and medieval buildings, except for the keep. However, he would attain an interesting degree of fame, as he became the center of a theory proposed in 1920 that he was the actual author of the plays of William Shakespeare. While all the alternative author theories of Shakespeare's works are largely rejected by literary scholars, the so-called Oxfordian theory is considered by many to be the most interesting and most credible. I would be remiss if I did not mention here another member of the de Vere family with whom many The History Guy fans are familiar, the famous prankster Horace de Vere Cole, who was descended from a granddaughter of the 15th Earl. Bunga bunga. The de Vere family held on to Hedingham Castle until 1625. In 1713, it was bought by the Lord Mayor of London, who was responsible for much of the beautiful gardens and landscaping, as well as the beautiful Queen Anne Mansion House. He left the castle to his great-granddaughter, where it stayed in her husband's family until 1981, when the last heir of the family left it to her cousin, who by coincidence was a descendant of the de Veres through both his paternal and maternal line. His son still lives in the castle, which is not far from the keep their ancestor built 890 years ago, which is still standing, and which you can still visit like Miss History Guy and I did in 2015 for the quite reasonable price of £8.50 per adult. To get to the keep, which stands on 160 acres of gardens, you cross this bridge, which was built in 1489 to commemorate a visit by Henry VII to the castle, which alone should shock we backwoods rebels from the colonies, since the bridge was built before Europe's discovery of the New World, and yet is 3.5 centuries newer than the keep. A keep is a type of fortified tower usually built inside a castle. A keep serves as a fortified residence and a refuge of last resort should the castle fall. A shell keep is usually a round stone wall, usually built atop a motte or mound that was artificially created. Shell keeps, like this one at Windsor Castle, with wooden buildings inside, were built because the designer did not trust the motte to bear the weight of a full stone building. But Hedingham is a four-sided stone keep, a type that was commonly used by Normans in England. To get an idea, the keep, which is built of flint rubble with lime mortar faced with dressed ashlar stone, is 11 feet thick at the base and averages 10 feet thick at the top. The entire four-story structure is 70 feet tall. Keep originally had 4 turrets at the top, although only 2 remained, 2 having been removed in the Tudor period. It is nearly square. The east and west sides are 53 feet, and the north and south 58 feet. It has a spectacular 2-story great banqueting hall supported by a massive Norman arch and featuring a great fireplace, although smoke-free heating was installed in 2015. The castle has numerous displays, including medieval arms and armor, and quite a number of halls, windows, and cubbies where you can get your medieval on, although some stairwalking is involved. The keep often hosts reenactments and events. It is available according to its website for weddings and corporate events. Really is an amazing, well-preserved castle on a spot of land that represents the long history of Essex. Hedingham was one of just many places we visited on this trip. Look forward to more travelogues in the future. And if you enjoyed today's episode, please consider becoming a patron on Patreon. I hope you enjoyed this episode of The History Guy, short snippets of forgotten history between 10 and 15 minutes long. And if you did enjoy, please go ahead and click that thumbs up button. If you have any questions or comments or suggestions for future episodes, please write those in the comment section. I will be happy to personally respond. Be sure to follow The History Guy on Facebook, Instagram, Twitter, and check out our merchandise on teespring.com. And if you'd like more episodes on forgotten history, all you need to do is subscribe.